Hello and welcome to Space Planning for Small Library series that starts today. Thank you for joining us today or for watching this recording. A reminder that this is a three-part series that will continue to the next 2 Mondays this month at 10 a.m. So be sure to register or invite your colleagues or board members to join us. My name is Shauna Kasegi. I use they or she pronouns. I am the Outreach and Continuing Education Consultant for the Southwest Wisconsin Library System. And if you have questions throughout the program, please feel free to put them in the chat box. Myself and my colleague Lori from Bridges will be monitoring for us today. We'll be looking out in the chat box for your questions. So today I'm excited to welcome back to SWLS our presenter, John Thompson. John has served as the IFLS Library System Director since 2007 and has consulted on over 30 building projects in the IFLS area. John has provided consulting, training, and workshops for library boards and staff on a variety of library administration topics, including building projects. And he was awarded the WLA Demco Librarian of the Year Award in 2021. And with that, I will pass it on to John. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Shauna. Welcome, everybody. And today we're going to focus on kind of assessing the library space and your service needs. As Shauna mentioned, this is the first of a three-part series, and the next two parts will follow up on this. We'll take a look today at assessing the needs, and then we'll figure out next week on how to meet those needs. There are a variety of different options, and then the last one will be how to fund some of those needs. We'll give you some tips and ideas. So we're going to kind of get started with this, and we're going to kind of look at it from a, what do I do next? You went to a library conference, you came back with, yeah, this library is renting out bikes. They're doing things with cake pans. They're doing lawn games. We just don't have the space. Every time we try to do something new, something else breaks in the library. We just don't have the space. Things are just really frustrating. And we've all been there. We've all tried to continue to meet the needs of our communities. Many of our library buildings were built when we didn't have all these library of things collections going on. We've had different formats. Some buildings in our system area actually predate computers. We've got one library in a building that was built in 1906. It was not designed for anything that the library is doing today. So we're going to really kind of focus on looking at what's in our library, what we don't have in our library, and how we might be able to evaluate the spaces and see if we can make some short-term changes or if we really do need to look at long-term ideas. So we are going to focus on 4 different parts of this assessment. We're going to look at a service assessment, kind of look around at our community a little bit, then look at our building, and then also kind of look at the readiness within our community to see if they are truly ready to do some sort of building project. As we go through, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have a question, just pop them in the chat, and Shauna will interrupt me, and we can answer questions as we go. So we're going to kind of look at some of the tools that we can use to assess our services. So we can, obviously look at all our statistical data. We can look at the different types of materials that we might be having. Are we needing to look at different types of services? How do we compare with the public library standards in Wisconsin? We have a library long-range plan. How does that plan mesh with what our building's capable of supporting? What are our patrons and our staff saying about our services? What are some of the things going on at our different events at the library? How's attendance going? And then what are we seeing from other libraries that we might think are things that we're missing within our library? So Wisconsin has had library service data that's online for a series of years. It goes back to about 1996 online. Prior to that, we had a series of print publications that compiled all the library service data. So if you're lucky and you kind of a little bit of a pack rat, you may have actually saved those service records because they were sent to all the libraries. If not, you may want to check to see if your system has copies of them. Otherwise, look around your library to see if you have your old annual reports, because some of that information is helpful when you're kind of looking back to where the library was from a statistical standpoint, when it was built. We're also going to, take a look at our peer libraries. But what are our peers? Just because we're a community of 1,200 doesn't mean our neighbor that's the same size is really a peer. So population is obviously one of the ways we'll look at it, but you may be doing twice as much circulation as that library next door. You might be open more hours. You may have more staff. The region you're in may have an impact on it. So are you of a more rural area or more suburban area, you'll want to look at those peers and really focus on true compatible peers. You don't want to compare to people that, just are outliers there. And then going back and looking at some of the historical information just to see, again, where the library was at. So what we're going to do today is we're going to actually look at some different libraries as we talk through this. So the library I'm going to be using is Cadott, they have a municipal population of about 1,400. When we strictly look at the peers within our system area, because this is the area that I'm most familiar with. When I look at the size of the buildings, the collections and things like that, it looks like they're pretty consistent. When I look at the list, all of the libraries on that list, with the exception of Cameron, are in buildings that are probably 20 to 30 years old. So they haven't necessarily assessed where they're at for space. So if we're to just strictly look at square footage of these peers, we'll say, yeah, we're all good, without knowing that actually all of these libraries probably need more space, just not the one that we're looking at. So this is kind of that historical look back. When you go back in time, we're kind of looking at the libraries here. And back in 1991, the annual report did not ask about public use computers. So at that point, most likely they were not predominant in the library world. So if your building's older than the 1990s, it was not designed to have computers in there. So the power distribution does not mesh with what your current needs are. Also, automated ILS systems that were shared, like the consortiums, did not exist back then. So the volume of materials you're shipping back and forth to libraries, they weren't set up to do that. So if the library hasn't really been remodeled or updated, you're really making do with the things that are going on. You'll notice at one point the library peaked their collection at 26,000 volumes, and this past year it's down to 10,000. The building itself is probably only capable of supporting those 10,000 items just because of the way it's laid out. But you'll also notice that the amount of videos increased dramatically over the last couple of decades. So again, how do all these formats fit in there? And then again, those other items from the Library of Things, they really didn't exist as a statistical item back, 20, 30 years ago. So you'll have to kind of look at what are some of the other things historically that we may have done in the library. That's where staff that have been around for a while, or board members, can help you provide that kind of that visual picture of what the library was like. And certainly if you've got pictures, that would be important. So you want to, again, look at from the statistics side, looking at your system and say, okay, how big is our collection? What types of materials do we have? How big are those individual collections? How many of those items are we borrowing from other libraries that maybe we're missing in our collection? What is the breakdown of our usage? Is most of it from our municipality? Is it half and half, a quarter and three quarters? Every library is unique, but you really want to see what it feels like for your library. And that's one of the trickier pieces, because the statistics in the annual report data shows extended county populations, which really don't necessarily reflect borrowing patterns locally. So you're not necessarily going to be able to use that extended service population to judge your peers, because it's really dividing up the remaining population within a county based on the proportion of circulation you do. So if, for example, if you have a library that's, serving a community of 20,000, most of the circulation is going to that library versus the libraries that are in communities of 1,000 or 3,000. So it's really not a good measure to look at population. Again, then you want to look at, who's checking out the items. Are most of the materials going out for adults? Are they going out for kids? Has that changed over time? You want to continue to look at those patterns to see how you may need to reassess what's going on in the library. And then, are you looking at adding different types of materials? So are there different populations that are moving into your area for work, or other reasons that you just need to build up some different types of language materials in your library? Are you looking at different formats? You're looking at playaways, are you looking at DVDs? Are you considering bringing back LP records to your collection? Back when I started as a library director, we checked out LPs, and then we started transitioning to cassette tapes, and then CDs, and then obviously streaming came along, and now LPs are coming back. So are you looking at things that are a little different than what the building was designed to have? And we've got libraries that are checking out snowshoes, cake pans, lawn games, bicycles, all kinds of different things. They don't fit on traditional library shelving. So how are you going to not only store them, but also how are you going to display and showcase them? So those are all things that are impacting the layout of your building. And then, are you looking at doing different types of programming or different types of services? All of a sudden you don't have a teen area and you want to create a teen gaming area. Well, how do you carve out that space within your existing building? Is that something that is just one thing that you want to do, or are there a whole host of other things that you want to look at doing? So you, again, want to look at what the library needs to do for programming, and then again, what's out there in the community for programming. So are there some ways to do some partnerships? So you really want to focus on the things that are missing. Do you want to add a fireplace? Do you want to create a makerspace? Do you want to build activity areas for the early childhood so that they can have a kitchen or different things like that? Are there things that are really important for your community? So again, looking at what you've seen in other libraries, what you've heard about at conferences, those all impact some of the things that you may want to be doing in your library. So then Wisconsin has a set of standards that are designed for planning. There are a few that are statutory, but most of them are just general guides on how you're doing. And so the way the standards are constructed is a tier system. So there's tier one is, this is the minimum set of services that should be available to everyone in the state of Wisconsin. Tier two gives you a slight expansion of those basic services. So you meet all of tier one, you're going up to tier tier 2 and you're trying to meet most of those services. And then tier 3 would be that highest level. And each of the tiers has a checklist available that you can use to kind of judge where you want to be. So you as a library can say, yep, I'm good with being a tier 1 library. We're doing what we can with the resources we have available. This is where we want to be. Tier 2, let's say, yeah, this is where I want to be. The budget allows for it. Our staff allows for it. We're going to look at the services to try to become a tier 2. So part of that set of standards is some quantitative standards that are looking at not only your municipal population, but your service population. So that is the people that you're truly serving that live outside of the municipality. So they're coming from surrounding areas. So we talked a little bit about this, that service data that's online uses that extended county population. So that's one way of determining your service population. Another one is to use a system-wide approach and looking at the non-resident usage data for your entire system. For some of you, if you're in a smaller system, that would work fine if you've got 1 or 2 counties. But if you're in a multi-county where there's 7 to 10 counties, that pattern is going to be extremely different for a rural county that may be, 2 hours away from the largest city in the system. So you'll want to look at that and say, yeah, it'll work or it won't work. The other way is to base it on local circulation patterns. So we're going to take how people are using the library and divide it out and create our service population. And that tends to be the one that I recommend using because it not only captures the individuals that are in rural areas not served by a library, but it would also capture patrons that are using your library that might already have a library as well. So in some of our counties, we've got libraries that are 2 to 3 miles apart, and we're bringing in individuals that, yes, they have a library in their own hometown, but they may be working in our library area. So they're actually using our library. So that helps build that pattern together. The other is just adding up the populations of the unserved areas from the surrounding areas. But again, if you're sharing those patrons with other libraries, you're not necessarily getting a true representation of your usage. So this is an example of how to create a service population using local circulation pattern. And this is the example that's shown on page 3132 of the standards document. Basically, you take your municipal population, divide it by the percentage of the percentage of resident circulation, and then that creates your service area. In this case, they're saying 85% of your circulation comes from your residents. When I look at it, that's a high percentage for a lot of our libraries. When we look at CADOT, and I'm using circulation data from 2019, just because that seems to be the best data we have available right now. Obviously with COVID, we've had, some odd circulation years. So when we look at it, the percent of their resident circulation is only 45%. So when we divide that resident population by that percentage, we've now created a service population that's 3,200 individuals. So that's a huge amount of service population for that community. I did do a chart there kind of showing where the patterns have changed a teeny bit, just to give you a sense that, yeah, it has fluctuated a little bit, but in this case, not horribly, but that may not always be the case. The other piece with the standards, it gives you some benchmarks to look at. So, the example from tier 1, you've got a print collection that meets the volumes per capita for print, for video, for audio, and then it also includes some notes about, yep, the exterior and the entrance is well lit and is identifiable with signs and clearly visible from the street. It's amazing when you drive through some communities, you don't know where the library is. You can't really pick out where that door is to get in the building. So that's one of the things to look at using the standards and see how you mesh together with those. All your programs should be in a space that's accessible to everyone in the community. And if it's not, you're making accommodations to make those programs accessible. So that was tier 1. Tier 2 gives you an increase in your collection. So now it's acknowledging English language learning materials, adult basic skills, your seed libraries, your cake pans, your toy libraries. It's acknowledging that there's another tier of collections within your library as well as within the system area. So another example would be the staff has a space away from the public that they can do their work. So there's a dedicated office for the director or some sort of workroom that's not right at the desk. So you can step away. The other is that you have convenient parking available for your staff. Are there a certain number of stalls per square feet of your building? Do you meet that? Some libraries are in a downtown area and you're relying strictly on street parking. The other big piece for libraries, which I tend to find a deficit, is seating. So do you have enough chairs? Do you have enough tables? Do you have a mix of those tables and chairs that meet the needs of your community? And the Public Library Space Planning Guide has a per capita benchmark for seating to give you an idea of how many chairs you should have in your building. They take up a lot of space, and generally what I've seen is that libraries get rid of tables and get rid of seating to put more materials in. So this little chart gives you an example of how many volumes are held per capita. And again, looking at this from a service perspective. So, if you're looking at a community of 3,000, you should have 5 titles per capita. Roughly, 15,000 print volumes in your collection to meet that basic tier 1 level. When I go look at CADOT, factoring all of those in, the basic collection that they should have for print is 16,000 items. So they're, the number here is reflected in the 2020 data. Obviously the 21 data was 10,000 items. So their deficit is 6,000 print titles. And that's just to meet the basic of what they should be having at that library. And again, same thing for audio recordings, just to give you a sense of that. Again, looking at some of that deficit and seeing where you need to be. So I'm going to stop quick and see if there's any questions.
Yeah, so far we don't have any questions, but feel free, if folks have any, to put them in the chat box.
All right. So the next thing is to kind of look at your library's long-range plan. Where does the plan connect with your building needs? Do you want to do some additional programming, but just don't have the space, or you want to offer STEM programming, and you just don't have the storage capacity to add those in there? If you don't have a plan or it's really out of date, now's a good time to really focus on developing a new one. We focus on your community, focus on what's going on with services, there are a variety of different ways to create that plan, and that's a whole nother set of presentation topics, but this will give you a basis to help you decide what might be missing in the libraries based on what the community is looking for based on that plan. Some of that planning can occur from suggestion boxes, surveys, focus groups, just people randomly say, you know, I wish you had more seating, or the chairs are totally uncomfortable. Looking at what else is going on in the community, hearing from staff. These are some of the basic ways you can gather that information, but you can also go out and be more proactive and find resources from other people. The other piece is to, when you look at the library is to create that visual picture. You know, some of us love statistics, others need that visual image to say, yes, I get it now. So, you know, what do the shelves look like? What do the chairs look like? How many do you have? What are the staff spaces looking like? How old is the HVAC equipment? You know, the furnace is original to the building. It, you know, what needs to change there? You know, what are you doing for programming in the library? You know, if you got 50 kids crammed into a little corner, take pictures of that so that you can show what's going on at the library, because there's going to be a group of people out there that don't understand what's going on in libraries today. They're still at that time where libraries are all about storing books. They're people spaces now, and you need to be able to demonstrate that to the folks that may not use the library as often. And if you're needing to do programs offsite because of capacity issues within your building, document those as well, so that people know that, yes, we had, you know, a reptile presentation and there were 100 kids there. That's a big thing that could be drawing individuals to the library, but we just can't do that because we don't have the room. So really focus on that visual story, and put that in there to go along with the numbers. So you create that dual package for the people that need the numbers, but then they also can see it visually. What you want to do to kind of see about your own space is look at what other libraries are doing. What are things that you wish you could do? Like, I really wish we had a study room, or I really wish we had a couple of chairs in the teen area, or I wish we had a kitchen in there for the kids, or I wish we had a kitchenette in our program room. Really kind of take snapshots of what other libraries are all about. Sometimes it's good to take tours if you can get a group together to kind of sell that vision. But in other cases, you may just have to do that, you know, virtually and share things like that. So again, document it with pictures so that you're aware of, oh yeah, I remember that was at this library or that library. You know, so here's a couple examples. So, you know, we're looking, oh yeah, I really love that kitchenette. It's got a dishwasher. I can wash some toys in there. We can have community events in there. We can save money and use real plates and silverware as opposed to going out and buying paper and plastic all the time. I really love the way that entrance is set off in that library there, where I really love that reading nook that was created in the building. These are spaces that I want to have that we don't have in our library now. So let's figure out that wish list that's, you know, kind of in pictures. Or I like these light fixtures. I like how this study room is defined. So it's a little hard to see, but the wall is actually pink in that room, and they've labeled all their study rooms by color. So there's a purple room, a pink room. It's easier for people to identify and say, yes, that's the room I want. They're all a little bit different size. You know, I really like the way these books are laid out. Different things like that. Those are the things to think about that are missing in your library. Now we're going to kind of switch to a different look at our community. So what's happening within our city or our village? What's going to impact us moving forward? So, how has the population changed? What's the economic situation in the village? Are businesses moving to the area? Are they closing down? What plans have been developed? All municipalities need to have a comprehensive plan. What does it say in that plan about the library? What does it say about community growth? What are they anticipating moving forward? Plan commissions are a good way of trying to figure out, okay, there's new housing development going on. There's a new business park being developed. Is the school district building? Is the school district looking at closing facilities? Are they looking at relocating different things? And then also keep an eye on news media. That's getting a little harder as local papers really dwindle away, and they're really bringing you a package of news from a region versus just locally. But you may want to just keep an eye on it. Social media obviously would be the other way to, if they're community Facebook pages or things like that, that you can tap into to really see what's going on. So one of the things that the comprehensive plan noted for CADOT was that, and this is 12 years old now, because it's a 2010 to 2030 plan. They asked within the next 5 years, the village of CADOT needs to build or expand and the library was one of the top vote getters in terms of agree and strongly agree. So there was definitely a need there. And then you look at, okay, they're looking at a community center as well. They also thought that the police department and the village hall might need more space. But then there's another group that says now we don't really need them to have more space. So this gives you an idea that, yeah, maybe we could do a building jointly, or we may need to focus on the library and the community center, and the community center may just be a larger meeting room. You're really going to then kind of focus on some of the other pieces that that really is important. Is school age, is the community getting younger? Or is the community getting older? Again, how is the growth going? Is it shrinking, staying about the same? Some communities, if you're on the border of a growing area, you may be seeing 10 to 20% population growth over a decade. That makes it very difficult to plan. And it also, when you look down into the future, you're looking at exponentially larger buildings than what you might have anticipated. The library typically looks at a planning cycle of 20 years. So you're looking at population growth, not only from today, but kind of looking at some past trends, looking at that potential for growth. Again, going back to that housing development. So if they're plotting out a 50-unit housing development, assuming that there's about 2 people in each house, you're looking at 100 new residents. Or if they're putting a multi-family unit in there, maybe it's got 6 floors of apartments or townhouses, you're going to have the potential for more significant growth than you've seen in the past. Again, when you look at projecting out, so let's say over the last 10 to 20 years, the community's grown 10%, and it appears that trend is continuing, then your 20-year projection moving forward would be 10% higher than it is today. So then you would take that projected residential population, and then assuming your usage is about the same, you would create your design population for your building based on that population growth that 20 years out. Are there any other questions yet, Shauna?
I don't see any questions yet.
Okay. And then we've kind of assessed our community. Now we're going to take a look at our building. So, you know, what are the color schemes of the building? Is it a late 1970s, early 80s burnt orange? Is the building a renovated building that we moved into? So was it an old bank building? You know, so is the building actually 70 years old, even though the library's only been in there 20 years? What does the building look like in terms of, you know, are there cracks in the foundation? Does there appear to be water damage? Are there accessibility issues? What are the restrooms like? You know, what is the lighting condition? Are they old light fixtures? Are they not in the right order? What are, you know, how old is the HVAC system? Are the windows leaking? Can we even get into the building? So you really want to focus on that, because if your building is in really rough shape, just doing a short-term fix is not going to be the solution. It might tide you over for a bit, but you really need to look at it long-term. And then looking outside and saying, okay, parking, is it okay? Can people find us? You know, is the signage correct? Are we in a good visible location for the library? Again, looking at that accessibility, getting into the building. You know, when we look at current spaces or future spaces, one of the key things is the floor load. So library books are heavy. The building code requires 150 pounds per square foot for a floor load for your library collection. Most buildings that were constructed with a basement or multi-level do not meet that requirement for libraries. Libraries have a very stringent requirement, more so than pretty much anything else in the building code. If you're on a concrete slab, you're probably okay. Again, looking at your spaces, do you, again, have all the spaces you need for people to sit? Do you have the flow for people in the building? Programming and patron spaces take up way more room than you think. You'll hear from folks saying, well, books are going away. Well, yes, they're going away, maybe at some point, but shelving for those materials take up a really smaller proportion than one would think in a building. So you're really looking at the people and how they fit in the building from that assessment perspective. And then your technology. Are we pigeonholing equipment in spaces because, yeah, it's against the wall because that's where the power is? We have an empty corner, that's where we just put stuff. Does the facility meet our needs for what we envision us offering as the library? So we're going to take a look at Cadet. The building itself was constructed in 1927. The library has been there since 1968. It's a downtown building. It has 2 floors, and you have to go up to the main floor and down to the lower level. So basically, you can walk into a vestibule and go no further without having to climb stairs. So if you're an individual in a wheelchair, you might be lucky to get into that vestibule. The door swings in, there really isn't a good spot. Circulation desk is not accessible. The lighting's poor. The staff space is marginal. The collection is divided up onto 2 floors. There isn't staff necessarily on both floors at the same time. Horrible from a safety perspective, but even worse from a service perspective. So in their case, the children's area is downstairs. If there's nobody down there, patrons are left to fend for themselves, trying to find materials for their kids.
Hey, John.
Yep.
We have a question.
Yep.
Real quick. What is the floor load figure you mentioned to meet code? We are in a 97-year-old building and it's 2 stories.
It's 150 pounds per square foot.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if the building was designed to be a library, it will probably be fine, because that weight's been around for a long time. But if it's a conversion of an existing building, that's where you run into trouble, because it probably wasn't designed that way. What you can do is have shorter shelves and wider aisles, which then makes your need for additional space even greater. And we'll talk a little bit more about this next week, because that's one of the pieces we're looking at, is some of the options that are available. So this is kind of this look-see from an outsider looking in. One of the things I do for a lot of our libraries is, and that's part of the consulting side, is looking at a building from a service perspective and big picture kind of stuff. I'm not a structural engineer, so I can't quote all the engineering studies, but this building happened to be a old bank building. The safe is still there. But I did notice at one point, walking in an area, the floor is a little spongy. So there may be a floor joist that's broken, or something's just not right. So again, that would require an engineer coming in to assess that. So then I'm looking at it from okay, what are the positives? Well, it's downtown and people know where it's at. Unfortunately, that's about as much as I could say positive about that particular space. What's missing? Study rooms, program space, collection space, seating, among other things. So this is kind of the visual of that building. You'll notice that not much has been done to the exterior over time. It's Main Street parking. There is a little bit of a parking lot in the back. As you can see, this picture was taken in winter. There's a slight incline to get back there. That parking lot gets smaller when there's snow piles. These are the steps as you walk into the door to get into the library. You have 5 or 6 steps up. Some people will say, can't you put a ramp in there? Well, for every inch you go up, you need a foot of ramp. So the ramp would far outstretch the capacity within that little space. And then again, you still have to get downstairs. The return for the materials basically opens up into the library. There's no sprinkler system in here. So anybody could toss anything into that container and it would be in the library. Circulation desk does not meet ADA, it's too high. Computers are kind of, again, chucked up against the wall because that's where it was. The shelves are for the young adult. It's very hard to determine what's on that collection. It looks just like a group of books. Everything looks the same, and there's no really way of distinguishing it. Tables oversized for the space that's available. Collection, not great lighting into that space. Again, not an appealing way to find the materials. End of the shelves, you don't really have a good turnaround. Again, the lights are not great in there. They're kind of on top of the shelving and looking down. They don't light the whole structure. Office workroom spaces are not ideal for the stuff that's been going on in the library now. These are the stairs down to the children's area. You enter into an area where the picture books and readers are. The shelves for those are too high for preschool kids. So again, not an accessible collection. This kind of gives you another shot of some of the picture books. This is the OPAC down in the children's area. And then there's a sign above this door saying not an exit. So this door goes somewhere that you can't literally get out of the building. Restroom is only in the lower level. And then you can see there's water damage for the exterior steps going out to the back of the building. So not a great facility. So then the next piece is to kind of look at where you're at today, as well as what you might need in 20 years. So Wisconsin has a space needs planning outline. The document itself is a couple of decades old. I think it's 2009. However, the basis of that document has been updated in other states. Connecticut, I believe, did theirs in 2014, so it's a little newer. The basic information is still there. What's missing is the uniqueness of the study rooms and maker spaces, and then the trend for just having lower shelves. This was designed for when you might have 72, 80-inch shelving. That's not the trend in public libraries anymore. So you can still use it to get you started, but your square footage may actually be a little higher based on some of those extra needs, but it just gives you a basic to get started. So in this case, again, we're looking at population growth, looking at a service population for 2018 of 3,000. Growth isn't going to be great, but 20 years, so it'd be about 3,500. There was significant growth at a period of time for the community, but that has kind of trailed off. So again, you really kind of want to focus on that last little bit of growth, and not historically, multi-decades before. Again, we're going to look at taking that future service population and then kind of building what your ideal collection might look like. You're going to look at this from a fiscal perspective as well, because if all of a sudden you're going from 12,000 items to 21,000 items, your budget may not support that capacity over the next 20 years. So you either want to make sure you have in your budget money to buy a new collection to house in that new library, or just realize you may have to temper some of your growth pattern there. Again, looking at it from an audio and video standpoint, looking at your number of chairs that you have in there. Again, this is seats per 1,000 population. Will give you a ballpark. Obviously, if you're at 5,001 or 9,990 people, you may want to look, okay, I'm not going to take 9,000 and multiply it, that 9 by 10 to get 90. I might do the 9 by 7 to get 63, just to get a little smaller. But those are choices that you make as you move forward within this process. So in this case, we're going to look at Cadot having 50 chairs. That would be the chairs going around your tables. It will be your lounge seating, and for different ages. So that'll include your adults, your teens, your school age kids, your preschoolers. All of those have different seating requirements. They're all different sizes and shapes for chairs, and you want to make sure that you have allow for a mix of those. Your staff workspace is not based on the number of full-time equivalents you have, but it's more based on the functions that you're going to need. So we want to have a director's office. We need a place to check out books. We need a place to check in books. We need some space for courier delivery, material processing, where we store our holds. All of those are spaces that you need to account for. Some of them can be shared, but it again depends on the volume of your operation and how you want to share them. And then you're looking at your meeting room space. Again, this is story time room, your program rooms, whether you want a board conference room, study spaces. This guide also includes a computer training lab. Those are pretty much going out of vogue now. but they may be a function of some things. And one of the items you may want to look at is, okay, we only do story time twice a week. What are we going to use that room for otherwise? Can we also make it our STEM room or our maker space, or can it also double as our conference room or a smaller meeting room to go along with a larger meeting room? How we can use those spaces multiple ways, that's going to be important moving forward, just to make sure that you're making cost-effective decisions. There are special use type items that give you an allocation within that planning guide, whether it's a microfilm reader for local history, a staff lounge, your photocopier, different things that you want to have in your building, but you don't necessarily want to spell out in that detail in the very beginnings of assessing what space you might need. And then there's the hallways, the closets, and the mechanical stuff, places you can't put library stuff, but you need them to have a library. So they're really just infrastructure pieces within the building. This is what that all plays out. What I did here was take the current collection of the library and using those percentages, and this is assuming that everything's in the library and nothing's checked out, but it'll at least give you a ballpark. And then using certain spaces that are those percentages for special use or non-assignables on the smaller side of the percentage, because we're really looking at a fixed building. So in this case, the stuff that they have there now needs about 4,000 square feet without adding any meeting room space to the building. Then if we were to look at just meeting what our current service population was for tier 2, and then adding in a 50-seat meeting room, we're up to about 8,000 square feet. Then if we were to go out and look at our projected service population, again, meeting that tier 2, we're looking at roughly 10,000 square feet. So doing a small tweak to the building is not going to gain you 7,000 square feet. So when we look at libraries, again, if we pull out our peers, and I pulled this off of the LibPass and report site, so you can go in there and create your own special reports. So I ran a report just looking at square footage of some of the libraries with similar populations, and then looked at also their CERC. It'll give you an idea of what they are. The thing that I don't know from this information is how soon any of these buildings were renovated, added on, or their new construction. There is a way of looking at it from okay, none of these were new in the 2001 reporting cycle, 2021 reporting cycle. So again, it's a snippet of information, but it's something to start with. And again, looking at some smaller libraries, population-wise, again, there's a huge range of square footage between the buildings, and again, not knowing what they look like or when they were last done for construction, it's not necessarily a great set of peers. The other piece to when we've got all of this done is the community ready to support this? Most likely the library will grow exponentially from what it is. In some cases, your library may be 20, 30 years old, and the community still thinks it's a new building. So are they really going to be looking at getting a new building? An addition might be something that's more feasible. The easiest way to determine if your municipality is ready to go forward is to say, can we have some money to hire an architect to develop some concept drawings for us? if they say yes, then at least they're willing to listen. Is it part of the municipality's capital improvement plan? When is it scheduled to do that? What are the other things going on? You know, is the fire department needing new trucks, the wastewater treatment plant, police department, all of those things you're competing with. So is it ready to go? That's a good way to find out. You can do a fundraising feasibility studies, and that would judge some of that. Even doing some surveys and focus groups, yeah, you'll probably just capture the library supporters, but it'll be a good way of at least giving some credence to what you're looking for. Friends, members, and foundations, especially if they're larger groups, if they're vocal and active, they can help give you a sense, yes, we're ready to go do this. You know, is the school going to a referendum? It's probably the worst time to be bringing up wanting to have a library going on, same time the school wants to have a referendum. They're two separate pots of money, but the taxpayer sees them as all coming off their property tax bill. So you'll want to be mindful of that. And are there other campaigns going on? You know, is the hospital looking to raise money? Is there another group out raising money for a hockey rink or a park or things like that? You don't want to compete with other projects going on, but you also don't want to wait until it's the right time, because that right time may never come.
Oh, John, I think I accidentally muted you. Sorry.
That's okay.
I was trying to unmute myself. Someone asked, so do you recommend completing the space needs survey summary as one of the first steps in our building project process?
Yes. Yep. I would. It's good to give you a benchmark of where you're at before you decide all the other stuff that you want to go on. So look at where you are today within that summary, but then also kind of project it out a little bit. It'll at least give you a ballpark. And then this again is an example of that community readiness. Again, this is something that was from an earlier slide, but then you also want to look, you know, Lone Rock, for example, they just finished their comprehensive plan. And in that plan, they have an action step to plan to replace the existing library with a consolidated facility for village offices, library, history room, and community room. So they are looking at doing something, at least in their comprehensive plan. So in this case, the library may or may not even know that this is in the plan. But you need to be ready for it. So again, that's when you go back and say, okay, we've assessed our needs for 20 years. This is kind of where we're at. The shared facility has some unique situations with it that make the library space not need to be as big, because you might share a meeting room or share different spaces, but you want to be aware of this to see what's going on. So I'm going to share the slide deck with Shauna so that the links will be available. And obviously the recording will be posted out there. If you have questions that we didn't answer today, feel free to reach out to me via email or phone, and I can certainly do some, you know, quick questions and answers via email or on the phone. So I think we got a few minutes. Does anybody else have any questions?
It's a huge topic.
Yes. and next week some of what we talked about today will start making more sense, because we'll be trying to show you how to take those numbers and translate them to actual building options.
Thank you so much, John. Yes, this
You're
is a
welcome.
great reminder that please register for the next two parts if you haven't already. And yeah, please pass any questions you might have that might pop up after we sign off today. Feel free to send them to me. And John, we just have a thank you so much. Appreciate the information and direction. And I hope that the rest of you have a wonderful day. And we'll stay on for a couple minutes in case you do have a question, but otherwise we can end things there. I'll see you next week at Monday. Next week, Monday at 10 a.m.